Let me ask you something, and I want you to really sit with this for a moment. When was the last time one of your adult children called you, not because they needed something from you, not because it was a holiday or your birthday, but simply because they missed you? If you have to think about it, that tells you everything. I've been a family psychologist for over 40 years. I've sat across from thousands of parents, good, loving, devoted parents. And do you know what the most common heartbreak I hear is? It's not abuse. It's not abandonment. It's this. I gave them everything, and now I feel invisible. Here's what 4 decades of experience have taught me. Being taken for granted is not a reflection of how much you've given. It's a reflection of how you've trained the people around you to treat you. And that's actually good news. Because if you trained it, you can untrain it. Today, I'm going to share 6 powerful shifts that will transform you from someone your children take for granted into someone they genuinely fear losing. And I want to be clear right from the start, this is not about manipulation. This is not about punishing your kids. This is about reclaiming your dignity. This is about remembering who you are. So if you're ready, and I think you are, let's begin. Before we get to the 6 ways, I need you to understand something that might sting a little. But I promise you, it's the most liberating thing you'll hear today. There's a pattern in behavioral psychology that I call the availability trap. It works like this. When something, or someone, is always available, always accessible, always saying yes, the human brain stops registering that thing as valuable. Not because it isn't, but because the brain is wired to pay attention to what's scarce, not what's constant. Think about it. The air you breathe is the most essential thing in your life, but you don't think about it until someone takes it away. That's what many of us have become to our children. We've become the air. Always there. Always giving. Never demanding anything in return. And because of that, they've stopped noticing. This is not their fault. And it's not yours either. It's just how human psychology works. But once you understand the pattern, you have the power to change it. So here are 6 ways to do exactly that. Way number 1. Stop being the one who always calls first. I had a client, let's call her Margaret, 72 years old, 3 grown children. Margaret called each of them every single day. She'd check in the morning, send a text at lunch, and sometimes call again before bed. She never missed a day. And here's the thing, none of them ever called her first. Not once. When Margaret came to me, she was devastated. She said to me, "Doctor, do my children even love me?" I told her the truth. Of course they love you, Margaret. But they don't miss you. And there's a very important difference. You cannot miss someone who never goes away. You cannot long for a voice you hear 3 times a day. Margaret had made herself so constantly present that her children had no space to feel her absence. I asked Margaret to try something that terrified her. I asked her to stop calling first. Not forever. Not as punishment. Just to step back and wait. It took 4 days. 4 days of silence that felt like an eternity to Margaret. And then her youngest called. "Mom, are you okay? I haven't heard from you." That phone call meant more to Margaret than 4,000 calls she had made herself. Because for the first time, her child reached for her. Now, I'm not telling you to disappear from your children's lives. I'm telling you to create enough space for them to feel what life is like without your voice in it. That's not cruelty. That's wisdom. Way number 2, build a life they want to be part of. Let me paint 2 pictures for you, and you tell me which parent you'd want to spend a Saturday afternoon with. Parent A sits at home all day, watches television, waits for the phone to ring. When you visit, they tell you how lonely they've been, how long the days feel, how there's nothing to do. You leave feeling heavy, guilty, and honestly, a little relieved to go. Parent B just got back from a watercolor class. They're telling you about a book club they joined, a neighbor they're helping with a garden project, a trip they're planning with friends from their community center. They're laughing. They're busy. They're alive. Which parent would you call more often? The answer is obvious. And yet so many of us fall into the trap of making our children our only source of meaning. We retire, our social circles shrink, our world gets smaller, and suddenly our adult children are carrying the entire weight of our emotional world on their shoulders. That is an unfair burden, even if we don't mean it to be. Here's the truth that might surprise you. Your children don't owe you their time. But when your life is full and interesting and vibrant, they will want to be in it. Not out of obligation, out of genuine desire. So take a class, join a group, start a project, volunteer somewhere, get curious about something new, not as a performance for your children, but for yourself. Because you deserve a life that's worth living, regardless of who shows up. And I promise you, when your children see you thriving, something shifts inside them. They stop seeing you as someone to take care of, and start seeing you as someone they're proud to know. Way number 3, set boundaries without guilt. This one is hard. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. I've worked with seniors who are financially supporting adult children well into their 40s and 50s. I've worked with grandparents who babysit 5 days a week with no break, no thanks, and no acknowledgement. I've worked with parents who have become the emotional dumping ground for every problem in their children's lives, absorbing stress, anxiety, anger, while getting nothing in return. And when I ask them, why don't you say no? The answer is always the same. They're my children. I can't say no to my own children. Yes, you can. And you must. Saying no is not selfish. Saying no does not make you a bad parent. Saying no teaches your adult children something crucial, that you are a human being with limits, feelings, and needs of your own. Not a resource, not a service, a person. Let me give you a few examples of what healthy boundaries sound like. I love spending time with the grandchildren, but I need at least 2 days a week for myself. I'm happy to help when I can, but I'm not able to be your financial safety net every month. I want to hear about your problems, but I need you to also ask how I'm doing. Will this be uncomfortable? Yes. Might your children push back? Probably. They're used to the old arrangement. Change is always met with resistance. But here's what happens when you hold your ground. Respect grows. And where respect lives, the fear of losing you lives too. Because when someone realizes you have limits, they also realize you have value. And people protect what they value. Way number 4, stop oversharing your loneliness. This might be the most counterintuitive thing I'll say today, so please hear me out before you react. When you tell your children, I'm so lonely, or no one ever visits me, or I just sit here all day with nothing to do, you think you're expressing a need. And you are. But what your children hear is a demand wrapped in guilt. And guilt-driven visits are not real connection. When your child shows up because they feel guilty, they're not present. They're counting the minutes. They're resentful underneath the smile. And over time, resentment builds. The visits get shorter, then less frequent. Then they stop altogether. I've seen this cycle destroy so many relationships, and it always starts with the best intentions. Here's what I teach my clients instead. Don't broadcast your emptiness. Demonstrate your fullness. Instead of, I have nothing to do, try, I've been learning how to grow tomatoes and they're actually turning out great. Instead of, no one calls me, try, my friend Joan and I went to the funniest movie last weekend. Share what you're doing. Share what excites you. Share what makes you laugh. When your children see that your life is full, 2 things happen. They feel less burdened, and they become genuinely curious about what you're up to. Curiosity is a far better foundation for a relationship than guilt. Always. Way number 5. Be honest, even when it's uncomfortable. So many seniors I work with have spent decades swallowing their feelings to keep the peace. Their child forgets their birthday, they say nothing. Their grandchildren visit and don't say thank you, they say nothing. They're left out of family decisions, they say nothing. They tell me, I don't want to cause trouble. I don't want to be difficult. But here's what silence actually does. It doesn't keep the peace. It kills the relationship slowly, quietly, from the inside. Because every unspoken hurt becomes a brick in the wall between you and your child. And eventually, that wall gets so high that neither of you can see over it anymore. Honesty, loving, measured honesty, is the antidote. There is a world of difference between aggression and honesty. Aggression says, "You never care about me. You're a terrible child." Honesty says, "It hurt me that you forgot my birthday. I know you're busy, but it mattered to me." The first one starts a war. The second one opens a door. When you speak your truth with love and without accusation, you give your children something incredibly valuable, the chance to make it right. Most adult children don't realize they're hurting their parents. They're not cruel, they're oblivious. And they cannot fix what they don't know is broken. Vulnerability is not weakness. It takes far more strength to say, "That hurt me," than to swallow it and smile. And the parent who can be vulnerable is the parent who gets truly known. And being truly known is how you become impossible to take for granted. Way number 6, become someone who can walk away. This last one might be the most important thing I say in this entire video. So I want you to really let this sink in. The person your children will fear losing most is not the person who clings the tightest. It's the person who could walk away and still be okay. This is what I call emotional independence. And it is the single most powerful thing you can develop at this stage of your life. Emotional independence does not mean you don't love your children. It means you don't need them to survive. It means your happiness, your identity, your sense of purpose. None of these things collapse if your child doesn't call this week. Think of it as building what I call an emotional portfolio. Just like a financial advisor tells you not to put all your money in one stock, I'm telling you, don't put all your emotional wealth in one relationship. Diversify. Invest in friendships. Invest in your health. Invest in hobbies that challenge you. Invest in a purpose that gets you out of bed in the morning. Invest in the relationship you have with yourself, because that is the one relationship that will be with you until the very end. When your children see that you are whole on your own, not desperate, not needy, not clinging, something profound happens. They stop treating you like an obligation and start treating you like a choice. And a relationship built on choice is a relationship built on real love. The most powerful position in any relationship is being someone who chooses to stay, not someone who has to. I know this video may have been hard to hear in places. Some of these truths sting. And I want to acknowledge something. You have spent decades giving, sacrificing, putting everyone else first. That is not a small thing. That is a lifetime of love. But love without boundaries becomes resentment. Generosity without limits becomes invisibility. And silence in the name of peace becomes loneliness. The shifts I've shared with you today are not about punishing your children. They are about honoring yourself. Because you are not just someone's parent. You are not just someone's grandparent. You are a human being who has lived, loved, struggled, and survived things that your children may never fully understand. You deserve to be seen. You deserve to be valued. And you deserve to be feared lost. Not through games, not through manipulation, but through the quiet, undeniable power of a person who knows their own worth. Here's what I want you to do this week. Just one thing. Pick one of these 6 shifts, whichever one hit home the hardest, and start there. You don't need to change everything overnight. One small shift is enough to set a new direction. And if this video spoke to you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Tell me, which one of these 6 are you going to start with? I read every single comment, and this community, our strong elderly life family, is full of people who understand exactly what you're going through. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the bell so you don't miss the next video. I have so much more to share with you. And I'll leave you with this. You didn't raise your children to lose you without feeling it. Now it's time to remind them what they have, before it's too late. Take care of yourself. You matter more than you know.